Well, what's up, beautiful people? It's your boy Judeo, and I'm back again with a new video. Today we're going to be checking out someone I've been watching for quite some time now, and I decided to bring this video to the channel. I haven't seen it yet, but I know it's going to be a good video. The title is very interesting. It is Why 75% of the Middle Class is Screwed. The author of this channel is called Andrei Jikh, and he provides very educative content. I'll put the link to this video in the description in case you want to go check him out. He has 2.1 million subscribers. A lot of people are already watching him, but you know, if you haven't, get into it, you know. I'm excited for this one. Let's see why the middle class is screwed. I don't know if I'm in the middle class. I'm not.
All right, so this is crazy. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just created a new way to measure the health of the economy, and it's called greedflation. Now, it's not called that at all, that's a made-up word, but you know how they say that the middle class is shrinking and it's getting less and less money? Well, here's why. Did you know that in 2019, the average pay gap between a Fortune 500 CEO and their employees was 264 to 1. That means for every $1 that an employee made, their CEOs made $264. Now, in 2020, that gap increased to 299 to 1. And last year, in 2021, that gap increased to 324 to 1.
Up.
That's a 23% increase. And this is all thanks to a study by Primerica and Change Research.
That means we should all be CEOs. Like, we should all be employing people. We should all own companies.
But it gets crazier though. Out of the entire stock market, the area where this greedflation was some of the worst was in the consumer discretionary sector. So these are companies that people spend their discretionary incomes on. In other words, anything that's left over after they've paid for their essentials. And it was measured last year that the average CEO was paid $26.1 million a year. Could you imagine?
The average, not the highest paid CEO, the average CEO. So when I think it's called median, so when you bring the high and the low, it becomes 26 million per year. My goodness.
Making $2.1 million a month?
My financial advisor was just telling me if I put, I think $300 aside for some years, I'm going to get to, I think, like $2.43 million, something like that. And then someone is making 26 million per year. Do they have two heads? Like my mom would ask. Do they have two heads? No.
Me neither. But that represents a 79% pay increase over the last year. And when you have pay increases like that, who cares if inflation's over 9%? Am I right? That represents 872 times more than what the average worker was making in those companies. But it gets worse though. The biggest pay gap on record so far was Amazon. For example, the average Amazon worker made $32,855 last year. But the new CEO of Amazon made $212.7 million. That represents a pay gap of $6,474 to 1. So why is this happening, right? It's happening because corporate profits are now at 70-year record highs. But what about the wage growth spiral and the employees causing this inflation? Well, that's not entirely true either, because real incomes of CEOs not only outpaced inflation, but they also outpaced corporate profits, while it was found that their employees' incomes were negative. Now, the good news about all of this is this. If you don't want to get left behind and have your income eaten away by inflation, Pew Research found that most people who changed jobs were able to increase their incomes. For example, between April last year and March of this year, 60% of people who changed jobs were able to increase their pay, which is awesome because last month the economy added 528,000 jobs, which surprised everyone. So that's the trick. Change jobs and don't stay in one place for too long. And for me,
you guys are getting it right. Change jobs. If your job is not paying you well, go.
I found that people who
please, this is not financial advice. Take this as entertainment, please.
smash the like button were more likely to support their creators, so smash that like button and that.
Okay, let's smash the like button for him because this is good information. He didn't ask me to do this, but he's providing good work.
That will really help me out a lot. But this week, we're gonna have some really important economic data released that will have a huge effect on the market. So in today's video, I wanna help explain exactly what it is and how this will affect us. So with that said, let's get right into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay because you know where this is going.
Rule number 1, never lose money. And rule number 2, what was that? 40 billion. Well, You don't lose money until you sell.
That was Warren Buffett from Berkshire Hathaway, which actually did lose over $40 billion. And even though that's the case, his strategy is still the best one by far, which is to continue to dollar cost average, collect those sweet dividends, reinvest them, and ignore the market's volatility. And sometimes,
yeah, if you're not dollar cost averaging, you should in your investment. So if you're not familiar with what he's saying or the term dollar cost averaging, I'm not like the toppest financial guy, but I have like basic knowledge. So dollar cost averaging is buying continuously. So when the market is high, you buy high. When it's low, you buy low. And then eventually or with time it's going to average and you'll be in profit. So that's dollar cost averaging. I'm not like a financial advisor, but that's how I understand it.
Sometimes it's fun to make sense of the market, like this week, because the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is going to release the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is how economists measure inflation. Unless, of course, the government changes it to something else, like whenever you see a salamander wear a top hat. Now, the last time we got the inflation report for June, because remember, we're always 1 month behind, that number was 9.1%, which of course was another 40-year record high. But this week, the stage is set and all the investors are holding their breath for this week's CPI, and the truth is, no one has any idea what's going to happen, but everyone has an opinion, and the majority of those opinions is that inflation would actually go lower. For example, Elon Musk said in his last Tesla shareholder meeting that he thought inflation would trend downward and that we would be in a mild recession for the next 12 to 18 months. So hopefully he's right. Now, the median economic forecast, which is the more official metric of what economists think the CPI will be, is 8.7%. Meaning most economists agree that inflation is behind us and that the worst is over. So hopefully they're right as well. But investors also agree. They want to see anything that is lower than 9.1%. The lower it is, the better it will be for the stock market. If it's higher than 9.1%, two things will happen. Number one, the stock market will probably end up going down because it doesn't like being wrong. And number two, the CME Fed Watch tool, which is the thing that predicts future interest rates, will increase its odds because it's going to think that the Fed will increase the federal funds rate by 0.75 to 1% come at the next FOMC meeting, which is going to be on the 21st of September. Now, if I had to personally bet my money on what I think will happen this Wednesday, I think regardless of what it is, the CPI will end up being wrong. And here's why. The CPI is not one.
But I hope it's wrong in the right direction.
100% accurate, and it's been criticized for having what's called a downward bias. And that just means that when we get these CPI numbers, inflation is probably higher than what the numbers are telling us. And that's because a couple things. Like, number one, the CPI does not take into account the difference or the change in quality and quantities. For example, when you go out shopping, we've all been victims of what's called shrinkflation, where companies shrink the size of their products, but they keep the same prices, right? And this is happening across the board, from Doritos to toothpaste and cereals, and on it goes. So the next time you're out and about and you're shopping, you have your hot Cheeto bag and it feels like it's empty and halfway filled with air, you're not going crazy. This is happening everywhere, and this is something the Consumer Price Index does not take into consideration. Number two, the CPI allows for what's called the substitution of items, meaning if, for example, both bananas and apples go up in price, because they're what's considered a comparable item, it allows economists to look at whichever increased the least and use that one to plug into the CPI. And that's why when we get these inflation numbers, it's almost never exactly what it is. That's why we're always like, wait, inflation is not 9%. It feels like it's way higher because I buy this thing and it's more than 9%. And that's because they're able to substitute certain items for other ones that they consider are equivalents. The reason I'm talking about inflation and the reason this matters is because the stock market is always trying to predict the future, but it's predicting the future based on inflation, or what it thinks inflation will be, the CPI, and how the central bank will react to said inflation based on how they adjust those interest rates. But it's
a lot of information, guys. Even for me, I'm trying to follow up, I'm trying to cope, but I think I'm gonna have to watch it again. Take notes for this one. Like, this is important information. He's very knowledgeable, but is also not financial advice. It's entertainment.
There's one problem. The problem is that the stock market right now is completely asleep because of something called QT, or quantitative tightening. Now, this is going to sound insanely complicated, so let me explain exactly what's happening right now with QT and how it all ties together. So try not to fall asleep on this next part. You might remember that
I'll try. Because it's a lot.
The Fed started to print $4.5 trillion to stimulate the economy, right? The more technical thing that they were doing is they were buying mortgage-backed securities and treasury bonds. In other words, they were insuring the entire market, including the mortgage market. But this year, in June, they started this QT program, or quantitative tightening, where they started to sell off the assets that they bought over the last couple of years. And that is at the rate of $30 billion in treasury bonds and $17.5 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities. But what people are forgetting is that they're about to ramp those numbers way up and double that. $60 billion a month in T-bills and $35 billion a month in MBSs. Now, their whole goal with doing this is to reduce their balance sheet. In other words, reduce their portfolio size from the $9 trillion-ish that it's at right now to about $6.5 trillion-ish. And this is supposed to go on for the next 2.5 years. But the problem is that it is so complicated, the stock market has no idea how to price all of this in and make its future predictions, and there's a lot of confusion, mostly because it's really, really confusing. So let me explain it as I understand it and how this is going to affect us. All right, two things. One of the assets the Fed is selling is, of course, their treasury bonds. And remember, whenever you sell treasury bonds, their prices go down, like you would when you sell anything, and their interest rates go up. And the reason treasury bonds are so important to the market is because they set guaranteed interest rates, right? So if I'm a bank, I would never loan an interest rate to someone that is lower than what I could guarantee myself directly from the government, right? Because I'm taking on a risk, so I want to be paid more than what I can get from the government. So I hope that makes sense. But that's why they influence so much of the mortgage rates and consumer loans. And as you can see by this chart right here, the Fed is decreasing its weekly supply of treasury bonds. And this is a good thing. That means they're sticking to their word and they are selling off their treasury bonds. But that's also why interest rates are obviously going up. Now, the second asset the Fed needs to sell is, of course, the MBSs, or the mortgage-backed securities, which based on this data doesn't look like they're doing that at all. Looks like they're still
like kind of a straight line. It's like go up, come down.
Picking up the market, they're kind of buying and selling and buying and selling, and it's really confusing. So here's what's actually going on here. Because of accounting reasons, the Fed has a 3-month window to settle, which means what's happening right now won't be shown until 3 months from now at the beginning of November. That's when that graph will hopefully start to go down. So to sum everything up, everything I just talked about as far as
because we don't know if they're selling,
the Fed selling off all their assets, the prediction is that this will affect the federal fund rate by at least 1%. And the dollar going up 10% is like the equivalent of the federal fund rate going up 0.5%. So in total, about 1.5% from everything we talked about. But that's in addition to the fact that at the end of the year, the federal fund rate should be anywhere between 3.5 to 3.75%. Now, if all that sounds really confusing, that's the whole point. The point is, no one, not stock analysts, not economists, not Warren Buffett or Jimmy Buffett, understand exactly how this quantitative tightening program will affect interest rates and therefore the market. But the theory is that if printing
in Canada, I heard they were going to add 2% interest rate on top of what they added previously.
$500 billion affected the market to the degree that it did, then surely pressing Command Z is going to have some effect on the market as well. But the point is that the market is not priced it in because it doesn't know. And whenever it doesn't know, there's uncertainty, and uncertainty creates volatility. So if you wake up one day and you see your portfolio up and then down and then up and then it's extreme, that could happen. And if and when it does, just know that this is probably why it's happening. The good news though is I think the central bank is extremely smart because they made the dollar extremely valuable. It's a strong dollar. And that's like a clever marketing strategy to tell the world, hey, come park your currency with the dollar because we have a stronger economy and our dollar is gonna make you money and we're gonna pay you an interest, which is amazing because as the Fed sells off its balance sheet, it will also therefore increase its interest rate and therefore attract more foreign investors, which only makes the dollar even more strong, which is so clever because it's a...
Now you've told us, everybody knows now. And now everybody else can use your strategy and make their currency stronger. Russia is coming for you guys.
Way for the Fed to get other countries and other entities to absorb India, China, their excess selling of Japan, all the assets that they've bought over the last couple of years. Super interesting. Just me. Now, if the Fed feels like we've reached what they consider an equilibrium between supply and demand and 2% inflation, that's when they'll stop selling. So that's what I think their strategy is, and they have so many of these little levers to make sure that this gets done. So that's what I think is interesting, but either way, I'm not smart enough to figure it all out, but I do think that later this year, I might end up making a video about the repo market, which in 2019 was on the edge of a knife, but that'll be for a separate video. At the end of the day, I'm not an economist, I don't have an economics degree, nor do I have an MBA, so don't listen to me. I'm still trying to figure it out just as much as you are, but this is the extent to how much I've been able to figure out. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Go grab up to $250 worth of free Bitcoin right here. Please don't forget to move it.
Okay, that was a very good video. A lot of information, guys. So I suggest you watch it again and take notes. If you want to go to his channel, I'll put the link to the original video in the description. But I find it very, very, very interesting how he comes up with all this information. A lot of research. Yeah, because this thing is not from his head. He had to research, get the information, get the data, and put it all together to make this great video for us. And because of him, I don't have to go read books. I just have to watch him, and now I know some things. But again, this is not financial advice. I had a good time. Thank you guys for staying with me to the end of this one. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you on the next one. Let me know if you like this content, and if you want us to keep bringing more, I will happily, because I watch this by myself anyway. So if you want us to keep seeing more, let me know and I'll bring more. Have a wonderful day. Peace.